Welcome to Co-Created, where we take you behind the scenes of digital storytelling projects from Canada and around the world. A digital story is a short film created with a trained facilitator about a meaningful moment in a person's life. Using voiceover narration, personal images, and video editing techniques, these projects empower individuals to own their own story. I'm Kristy Wolfe, and this is Co-Created. Now, tonight we have a very special episode of Co-Created for all of you. We're doing a kitchen table takeover in honor of World Heart Day. We're bringing together advocates, caregivers, healthcare providers, anyone interested in digital storytelling to experience the powerful stories that highlight the importance of neurodevelopmental care for those living with congenital heart disease. With us tonight are three storytellers, Kristi Bateman, Kristen Miller, and Jennifer Saran. You're going to get to know these ladies as we go further into our evening. We also have some partners with us from Common Language Digital Storytelling, Western Canadian Children's Heart Network, and Conquering CHD that you will also get to meet. Before we go any further, though, I want to introduce you to my co-host this evening, Dr. Mike Lang. He's the founder of Common Language Digital Storytelling. Mike's going to share a little more about what Common Language is and what exactly a kitchen table night is.
Yeah, awesome. Kristy, I'm so excited to be here with you guys tonight and all the people tuning in for World Heart Day. It's a special night because we called it the Kitchen Table Takeover. And that's because we do this type of stuff all the time where we get together online with a group of people and watch stories. And I'll tell you a little bit more about common language in a second. But first, I want to tell you why we call these nights Kitchen Table Nights. It actually comes from a book written by a physician, Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And I was given this book a long time ago when I was going through sort of my own healthcare challenge. And it has some amazing short stories about health and wellness in it. But I just wanted to read just a little bit from this, just to set up the night. Set up why we call this kitchen table night. So here we go from the book. Everybody is a story. When I was a child, people sat around kitchen tables and told their stories. We don't do that so much anymore. Sitting around the table telling stories is not just a way of passing time. It's the way wisdom gets passed along. The stuff that helps us to live a life worth remembering. Despite the awesome powers of technology, many of us still do not live very well. We may need to listen to each other's stories once again. Most of the stories we're told now are written by novelists and screenwriters, acted out by actors and actresses, stories that have beginnings and endings, stories that are not real. The stories we can tell each other have no beginning and ending. They are a front row seat to the real experience. Even though they may have happened in a different time or place, they have a familiar feel. In some way, they are about us too. All stories are full of bias and uniqueness. They mix fact with meaning. This is the root of their power. Stories allow us to see something familiar through new eyes. We become in that moment a guest in someone else's life, and together with them sit at the feet of their teacher. The meaning we may draw from someone's story may be different from the meaning they themselves have drawn. No matter. Facts bring us to knowledge, but stories lead to wisdom. And I love that final quote. Facts bring us to knowledge, stories lead to wisdom, because I really think, especially in healthcare, we've been really good historically at the facts and knowledge piece, right? We can give you brochures and pamphlets and websites and all the information, research papers. We can give you so much information and facts and knowledge. But what we haven't historically been very good at is sharing the stories of other people who have walked this path before you, so that you can glean wisdom from those stories and apply it to your own life. And so that's really what we're hoping for tonight. That's what kitchen table nights are all about, is listening to stories, gathering around a virtual kitchen table, listening to stories so that we can learn and grab wisdom from the stories, apply it to our own lives. That's what we're really hoping for. And just so you guys know why we do this, like Kristy said, digital storytelling is something that she's and a lot of other facilitators on the call tonight are doing, but it does take a little bit of effort and learning to know how to do digital storytelling facilitation in a way that supports everyone's well-being as they go through it. And that's what Common Language is all about. We train people around the world to do digital storytelling facilitation, and I think we'll throw the link in the chat to the website if you want to learn more about that. But it's a very cool sort of community of facilitators who are using digital storytelling in all sorts of different areas after they take the training. we get together all the time and learn from each other and support each other as people work on amazing projects, like the amazing stories you're going to see tonight that Kristy was able to facilitate. So that's it for me. I will be hanging out in the chat, and I'll the color commentator for the rest of the night. But I'm excited, Kristy, to hear the story. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. All right. So tonight we are watching stories and having conversations. We will be watching 3 stories all together. And after each one of these, there'll be time for conversation with the storyteller. Often in kitchen table nights, the way we've set it up with Mike is that there will be a breakout room. And tonight we're expecting a bit too many people to make the breakout rooms feel as successful. So we've decided that we're going to have people here that are on the group. They are welcome to add into the chat if you've got a question, if you've got something that resonated, if you want to say, I'm so and so's mom, and that story is phenomenal. I love her so much. That is absolutely an appropriate comment. Like, get in the chat and talk about it. Because one of the things that I've really noticed over the years as people are sharing stories, those comments that are written down really stay with you. And that's why I was asking Mike if the chat was going to be available, because one of my favorite things is after a conversation like this, going back through the chat and telling the storytellers and sharing with them some of the comments that were done about their story, because you don't always have the chance to read everything while you're in the middle of also talking about it. So definitely put thoughts, ideas, questions in the chat. We'd love to involve it that way. Yeah, what else can I tell you? I think that's pretty much it. Are you guys ready to watch some stories?
Oh, yeah. Can't
Okay.
wait.
So, our first storyteller is Kristi Bateman. Now, Kristi has a story called Unspoken, Finding Our Path with CHD. And she, and as well as our second storyteller, actually were part of a project that they created their digital stories connected to Dr. Marcia Basserman's Strong Hearts, Growing Minds neurodevelopmental care project. So there was funding from the Western Canadian Children's Heart Network to actually create these stories. So Kristi and Kristen both came on and said, I would love to make a story. I might be putting words in their mouth. Kristi's like, yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. And so Kristi spent a few months really making this story with me last fall. We talked about the idea of congenital heart disease and how, as a parent, you can show what that neurodevelopmental care, where that comes to play. So I'm not going to say anything else about the story. Kristi, is there anything that you would like to say before we watch the story?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to both of you for having this platform for us to share, because it is a lot of work putting all that time into a digital story, and what we want the world to see it. And so thank you for allowing that to happen. Um, Often I think neurodevelopment is not as talked about in CHD. We talk a lot about the medical journey. So I am looking forward to everyone seeing this and hopefully creating some awareness for those that are not in the CHD world, and people that are feeling like they are seen tonight.
Kristi, that was perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So, friends, as you're watching, we want you to be thinking about what resonates for you in the story. If questions come up, any of that can go in the chat. You can wait till the end, or you can put it right as you're thinking about it.
Playdates and birthday parties, math homework and bedtime reading, swimming lessons and ski trips. 9 years ago, these were all things I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't allow myself to imagine. The moment we received our daughter's diagnosis, a critical congenital heart defect, I focused on survival. Statistics and outcomes, the medical prognosis. How many surgeries? How long in hospital? How would our family get through this? She survived her first open heart surgery. We made it through that first month. We could now go home and focus on first smiles, first steps, and first words. At 13 months old, she had 10 distinct words. Apple, the daily snack in our home, became one of her favorites. Shortly after her second open heart surgery, she asked for that snack, but it didn't come out as apple. It was different. Each time she tried to form the sounds into a word, they became jumbled. It wasn't just one word. She struggled with old and new words, words that we practiced over and over again. She was failing to reach milestones. We sought help in the community, months of speech classes and hard work, but nothing to show for it. My experience with my other children was vastly different. I knew something was wrong. We weren't getting the answers we needed. We went back to our therapist and our family doctor and were told, "You're doing what you can. It may take time." We gave her more time. And then at a scheduled cardiology visit, we brought up our concerns with our team. We were referred back to the complex therapies program for assessments, group work, and individual therapy with a specialized speech therapist. We saw so much growth and a diagnosis. That led to funding during her preschool years, which then led to more support, an educational assistant, school and home-based therapies. It set us on the right path. There was so much improvement and confidence. Our advocacy developed along with her speech. As parents, we learned strategies to navigate the future. When I look back at our journey so far, I wish there had been a clear path, or at least a map or a guide. What should we expect? What challenges are common with neurodevelopment and CHD patients? More importantly, who should we ask for help, and what should we ask for? In some ways, our family's neurodevelopmental journey has been more complicated than our medical one. Behavior challenges, learning disabilities, and mental health conditions are a reality for so many CHD patients and their families, regardless of their complexity. What we desperately need is not just the knowledge that these obstacles exist or how common they really are, but what do we do with this information? How do we navigate these challenges? Thinking back to our diagnosis day, I wish we had looked beyond just surviving and imagined thriving.
Kristy, you're muted. I
That's
see
fine.
all the
I knew
hearts.
as soon as I did it, I was going to regret it. But okay, so one of the things that we do when we're watching digital stories is just find some way to show appreciation. I see people throwing hearts in there and clapping. You can use your fingers and just snap. But it takes a lot of courage to share a digital story and takes a lot of time, Kristy mentioned already. And so thank you, Kristy, for sharing that story with us. I am going to just throw in the chat what we've asked you to think about, what resonated with you in this story, what wisdom can you draw? If there's questions coming up from you, you could definitely throw them in there. But Kristy, how did it feel to watch this story with everybody?
I don't remember that belly picture being in focus for so long, but it did. But no, I've watched it a few times after we worked on it, and it just is yeah, it's an emotional story. Obviously, we lived it, going through a lot of hard work and searching, trying to find our way and find our path. Isabella has done amazing, and we've come so far, but there definitely is an emotional component to that whole journey that we went through.
Well, and I can really see parent as advocate in your story when you talk about what we needed to find. And I think really focusing in on the speech and making the story about a very particular issue really made it impactful. Why did you decide to go into the speech side of things?
I think our speech journey was probably, first of all, it was the first area that we noticed there was an issue. So that was sort of the beginning of realizing that there was more than just her medical journey, and there would be some challenges outside of the hospital. And so I think that was a really prominent journey. And speech is so important in, how we interact with other people, and um, how we share our emotions and how we're feeling. And that was just speech is a tough one to not be able to speak. I know I could see her, you know, thinking about all the things she wanted to say and she wanted to tell us, and there's so much frustration with that. So that was definitely our focus, because I think it was the beginning of our journey. It was how I found my way, I guess, and how I started to realize who to reach out to and who to talk to for help, and what people could actually help us in the journey, and put us in touch with the people we needed to see.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even there's a line in your story. In some ways, our family's neurodevelopmental journey has been more complicated than our medical one. And I share that perspective. And I can see parents on here that are connected to the congenital heart world that are nodding their heads. And I just, that was a really powerful line that stood out. And I noticed that in your story, you use questions quite a lot. Not the idea of like, I'm going to tell you how to treat us, but like, how do we manage this? And each family is different. I really appreciated that. Mike, this is
Mhm.
the first time I think you're seeing this story.
Yeah, first
What
time.
stood out for you?
I loved it. Well, man, there's so many things, and there's been a lot of great comments in the chat, but I really love that idea, Kristy, of you learning to speak this advocacy language while your daughter's learning to speak. And I think, man, what a beautiful parallel story, right? Literally, your daughter's learning to speak, but so are you. And I think, a lot of parents don't realize it that they are learning an entirely new language, right? And and learning, there's a couple people that mentioned the path metaphor as a great metaphor for the twists and turns, the roots, the fog, the clear, open path, and that, man, what a great also way to think about, okay, how do you learn to navigate this very complex healthcare system at the same time that you're a new mother, right? And I think the complexity is what really stood out to me in this situation. Not only the medical complexity, but like you said, the complexity that came outside of the medical diagnosis, right? So yeah, that's what stood out for me. There was also a really great question here, Kristy. I'm assuming that that Carly is a healthcare provider, but she asked, "What do you wish healthcare providers could have said to you early on about neurodevelopmental challenges?"
We were like very fortunate in that we were patients. Isabella was a patient of the Glenrose. And so early on, she did have some appointments there, and they did actually sort of lay out what the expectations would be. And with all of the work that they do, and collecting all this data over, I think it's since the 90s, they have a lot of information to pass along. I think our problem was connecting, that information with support in the community. So
Yeah.
we knew what was available, or what to expect with her. We knew some of the challenges we would see. And so I don't think we were as much surprised by the challenges as we were just frustrated with how do we get her help. And we felt like the normal people that we would, see in the community just weren't really understanding that unique situation that she was in with CHD, and just some of the challenges were a little different than, I guess, your typical delays with speech.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question. Do we have time, Kristy?
Yeah, we had
Because
time.
there's another great one here from Vina, which I thought, first of all, says, thank you so much for sharing your experience. By the way, I got to read this one from Lorraine. Both Dad and I are so proud of all you've done for Isabella, you and your family, and Dad and I. Yes, they are proud of you, and I think anyone who watches that story
They're
can.
trying to eat cry on here.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, then I was also like, so somebody else wrote Joshua and Caleb loved it. So I'm
oh,
assuming it
those
was
are my boys. Yes,
Yeah.
they're watching in a different room. So
And yeah, you cannot watch this story and feel, right? Feel something. And that's what I really appreciate about people being so open and honest and sharing their lives in this way, right? Because it's hard to get these these inside stories, right, from families. There's a great question here though from Vina. When should healthcare providers start the conversation with families?
That's a tough one because obviously when we're in the hospital in the thick of things, that was something that was really sort of front of mind for me when we got Isabella's diagnosis. This wasn't on my radar, but it also wasn't something I even wanted to think about or talk about. I think I wanted to focus on her, getting through surgery, healing, getting better, and sort of feeling like we're out of the woods with the medical aspect of things. So I think, as soon as the family is feeling some, they're feeling comfortable and where they are medically, I think that's a good time to talk about it. Obviously, the earlier the better, because something like speech, early intervention is everything. So thankfully, I did push a lot for Isabella to get the help she needed, and she was quite young when she started receiving speech help, and that's made all the difference. So, you don't want to wait with a lot of this stuff. Like speech in particular is not something you want to wait for, a year or two. So the earlier the better, but also respecting where a family is at in their medical journey for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Kristy, when did you guys find out about diagnosis?
She was, it was our anatomy scan at, just after 20 weeks. So she was, I think, 22 weeks gestation when we got the official diagnosis. Yeah.
And so one of the things that I had learned at some of the conferences that we've been able to attend was just about brain development and fetal development. And even when you find out about a CHD diagnosis when you're pregnant will have effects on things. So it's so interesting learning more and more. You reference the research and the data that's been kind of coming to the surface since the 90s. And although neurodevelopment isn't a new topic, it is being looked at more closely in the cardiology world right now. And so I think that's really where these stories were also coming from, because we want those voices to be heard. And I know a lot of people here are coming at this from many different places. So Kristy's daughter received care at the Stollery Children's Hospital in Edmonton, and she was mentioning the Glen Rose, which is like the rehabilitation hospital that's nearby there, just for references for anybody. Kristy, is there anything else that's coming up for you that you wanted to talk about?
My goodness. I think that it just, I really am, excited about this new focus on, not that it's new, I guess, but more focus on the neurodevelopmental journey that these patients have. I know you'll talk about it a little bit later, about CNOC and just the amazing work that's being done. I checked in a few times and watched a few of the presentations, and it just is so incredible that we're not just focusing on, the repairs and getting these kids better and home, but we're also looking at how to support brain health while they're still in the hospital and as they go through all of these, um, medical, whether it's repairs or hospital stays, that there is a focus on that because it is so important. We don't want, as I said in the story, we're not just focused on survival. We're focused on like thriving in life. So I love it. It's amazing.
And I think that was something that really stood out for me. Being at any kind of conference where they are talking about neurodevelopment and our CHD kids, that's the only thing that's really in my control. That, like the education side of it, getting support from therapists and early intervention and all of those kinds of things are what I can actually do. I can't repair hearts.
That's
I
so
don't
true.
know how, right? Like, so that piece of it also stands out for me as that's the way to get families more and more engaged.
Yeah, and more involved in the hospital as well. Like all the little things that, some of them we were doing when she was teeny tiny and recovering from her first open heart, but there's so much more that, we can do and that you can encourage parents to do that really does make a difference later on. So, yeah, that's so true.
And I just want to touch on Vina had made a comment earlier. She was asking about what it was like in hospital, and as she was looking specifically too at the ICU admission and if there was things from a neurodevelopmental perspective, because at the Stollery Children's Hospital they do neurodevelopmental care rounds, and so everything from like teaching parents about reading to their kids, where sometimes that's not the first. I mean, it's not the first thing that came to mind when we were in hospital, um, but making like that speech pattern, the reading to kids, the singing to kids, that can still be a part of how a parent contributes in the ICU. And so I just kind of wanted to come back to that question and see if there was anything that from an ICU perspective, when you're in intensive care, if there's going to be a surgery or there has been a surgery, is there anything that you would say that could have been helpful as supports at that point?
Well, I think like Isabella isn't that old. And Christy, you know that the old unit at the Stollery, it's like a MASH unit. There were like kids lined up in beds and very overwhelming for parents, for children. And so thankfully now we have this beautiful new unit that has individual rooms where we can have those moments with our kids where we're, reading to them, have quiet. That's another thing. That unit wasn't super quiet for little tiny babies. And I think that space on our own just really, it does really help in, not only protecting their brains, but also just encouraging us to interact with them, whether it's reading, singing. I will sing to Isabella, but I do not want an audience in the background. So I think having my own little space, I feel a lot more comfortable to actually like interact with her in a more typical way that I would have at home. So I'm happy that that is sort of the new, experience for parents, and it's not the experience that we had necessarily.
Perfect. Well, Kristi, I just want to say thank you again for coming on, for sharing your story with us. For everyone that's on tonight, or if you're listening in the future, these stories are all public and we will send you a link to them. So if you're watching and you're thinking, oh, there's somebody that I would love to share this story with, my child's speech language therapist or the lactation consultant that helped us out back in the day, those stories are able to be shared. You are allowed to share them. And so we'll give you a bit more information. But Kristi, again, thank you so much for coming on, for talking about your experience.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
All right. Next up for our storytellers. And you know what? Let's give her one more round of applause.
Yes, Kristi, amazing, amazing story. So many ways. Wow. All right.
All right. Our next storyteller tonight is Kristen. Now, Kristen was part of the same project. Kristen also did a story connected to Marsha Vasserman's work. And this time it was a bit more about school age side of things. And there's, I don't know, personally, Kristen, there's some connections. I mean, I photographed her son Jackson when he was in the ICU before he had a heart transplant. And then I got to work with her to tell this story years later. And so it's really incredible to see those changes throughout the years and just your involvement in Circle of Hearts in Manitoba, right? Manitoba?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. Whew. So it's really neat to see how far your advocacy has come on this whole path. Is there anything that you would like to do to introduce your story before we watch it?
No, just to echo on Kristi's comments earlier, to thank you guys for allowing us to be here and to sharing our stories on a public platform that's different than just social media. So I'm excited to see what people think and resonate with, and just to not give any spoilers before you guys watch it.
Great.
I love it. So still about congenital heart disease, still about neurodevelopment. And same applies as you're watching. Think about what resonates for you in this story, if there's wisdom you can gain from it, or if you have any questions for Kristen specifically. All right, Mike.
I see the school calling. My heart races. It's my son's first day of kindergarten. This moment should feel like a milestone, something to celebrate, but instead, I freeze. I think back to a day not so long ago when he was waiting for a new heart. I remember back to that phone call when things were not going well. They kept him alive, hour by hour with medication. I felt so helpless, so small. He made it, and he was gifted his new heart. A fresh start for our family. A few years later, transitioning from preschool to kindergarten, filling out all those forms, I was reliving every part of his medical complexity and the times his doctor said, "He won't remember this. You're fortunate he's so young." In some ways, the doctors were right. He doesn't remember any of those early surgeries, the hospital stays, the pain and uncertainty, but his body does. Because of all the challenges he was facing, the way his brain struggled to organize thoughts, to stay on task or remember things, I was worried. Our healthcare providers kept saying he would catch up, but at preschool, I could see the difference. I sought out support from a private occupational therapist who understood and saw the invisible pieces. She began guiding us through the school system, step by step, making sure he has the help he needs. Heart Transplant Camp is another support for our family, a weekend of connection and fun for families with a paired education piece. One year, a neuropsychologist was brought in to talk to us. She introduced me to a term I had never heard before: executive functioning. I learned just how much his congenital heart disease impacts his brain. I've watched him face challenges that are not just physical, but neurodevelopmental as well. It's been a constant battle. Navigating therapy appointments, fighting for the right resources, advocating for his emotional health. Every day I fight for his future, for the life he deserves. How could I have known what was to come? It makes me angry. I wish I had known what I needed to advocate for. Congenital heart disease is more than just a broken heart.
All right, Kristen. Wow.
That was amazing.
Yeah, story.
Okay. Same question to our friends in the chat. What resonated for you? What stood out for you? What could you learn from this? Do you have any questions? And while people are kind of putting their thoughts together, Kristen, how was it watching that with a group of people?
I still can't believe I did that. I wish I could go back to my younger self and just know how far I'd be able to come as an advocate, caregiver, and just being his best mom to give him the best chance at life.
There was an image in there where you're laying on your side and you have this like bright yellow sticker on that says designated caregiver. And it just, I mean, we worked together for 16 to 20 hours on this, but that sticker really hit me today. Just thinking about like that we have to identify the designated caregiver and what that role actually means. That what hit you in the story today, maybe differently than has hit you before?
We have his yearly annual cath coming up next week, and the designated caregiver actually stood out to me the most. I have to advocate for him to get blood work done in a certain way because he's on an easy draw. And they're like, well, we'll just wait and see. But I'm like, you don't understand. I'm just telling you what's best. And I'm like, even now, 8 years later, I still have to advocate for him in the best way possible. And they're trying to deny me not to do blood work there. And I'm like, but you don't understand. Like, this is what's going to be best case scenario. So I just have to almost laugh because I'm like, I know what's going to happen next week, and it's going to be, I'm trying to tell them and avoid the situation, but they're not listening to me. So it's
Well,
parents know best at some point.
yeah. And I think that recognition that it is a constant, that you have to advocate with each new classroom, with each new provider that you work with, and not that any of them aren't doing their best with you, but they don't know your child like you know your child. And I think that really comes through in that story. I want you to talk a little bit about transplant camp because Marcia Basserman is on this call, and I'm hoping she'll
Yes,
kind of chime in on this too.
yes. So 2 years ago at transplant camp, Dr. Wasserman was there, and I'm pretty sure she saw every single parent's jaw drop to the floor when all of us were like, wow, our kid is that, checks off that. And, afterwards, all the parents were rushing up to her and saying, like, can you explain more? Can you give us more resources? And at that point, we had sought out therapy for my child. He was into OT into a year of it already, and we saw the great progress, but, still has a ways to go. So that camp, I truly feel pushed me to go farther with this. It made me angry. We know about the resources, but in Manitoba, being 2 provinces away from the major heart center, I feel that we're still very far behind. Given Jackson's needs at that time, I know the pandemic had a huge impact on us. I tried to seek out therapy and everyone denied me because of COVID, or they wanted to do Zoom and I'm like, I'm not doing Zoom. So I that was the biggest thing I think with Dr. Basserman being there is just to push for the resources. But if you don't know what to look for, you can just get so lost in it. And I feel in Manitoba, I can't, you know, obviously talk about other provinces, but I feel in Manitoba, we're very far behind in pushing these kids right from the start.
Well, and I'm just going to jump in on that a little bit from like an education perspective. So, I was a teacher for 13 years and I know education, and then we were thrown into healthcare, and it was hard to watch. I didn't know where to turn. There are two very different silos, you
Realms.
could definitely say, like, regardless of where you are, whether it's urban, whether it's rural, whether you're far from
Mhm.
the pediatric center. So we're in Alberta right now. Well, I'm in Alberta, she's in Manitoba, but we're all part of the Western Canadian Children's Heart Network. And across those provinces, there are 5 hospitals, but only 2 where there are surgical sites. And so, what Kristen is talking about is this idea that there's just things happening in different places in different ways. And we'll hear from Alina with the Western Canadian Children's Heart Network in a while, but there's so many strides that have been made compared to where we started. But
Mhm.
I can also hear it from you that there's still a lot left to be done. Um, I wanted to ask how you've shared your story.
I've basically just shared it on social media between Instagram and Facebook. Facebook was made public. I have shared it to a few friends outside of that, just via email or with the YouTube link. And the words coming up on the chat were exactly what I received back from my emails too, was powerful. My biggest push was to email my kid's school and to all of his teachers that he's had. And the principal actually emailed back and she said, she goes, Kristen, she goes, you've told me Jackson's story, but she's like, this hit differently seeing it. And she goes, my biggest takeaway was that when I said that you know, he may not remember the hospital stays, but his body does. And that's when she started to understand why I've advocated so much for him. And the month of January is brutal with all the trauma that comes out in his body. And I think since then she's adapted and given a little bit more what's the word? Like compassion to our story and understanding why I've had to fight for our OT to come in and give him the best resources. So that was worth it.
Thanks, Kristen. Mike, what's coming up in the chat?
Yeah, there's so much in the chat. Make sure you take a look afterwards, Kristen. Lots of
Well,
very positive things. I think things that really resonated with people is the phone call from school, right? The phone rings, you see the number. Yeah, that's exactly what a few people said in the chat. They're like, I still get that feeling when I get the phone call from school. And so that part really sort of resonated with people. A couple of people talked about the designated caregiver. There's something about that, there's that really, I don't know, it's resonating with people, that idea. It's both, Jen had a wonderful line. It's both a curse, but also a badge of honor, right? You're the designated
yes.
caregiver. I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about it. And then also the ice, right? Walking on ice. Right. I mean, man, not only is it you have to walk carefully, right? But there's
Yeah.
possibility you could fall through, right? And everything. And then you're
Mhm.
totally, fighting for your life in a way, right? And I think that's something that really connected with people. And I think, one thing that stood out to me, Kristen, was you talked about the invisible pieces, right? And you had the puzzle piece. And I'm just like, man, puzzles are hard enough when the pieces aren't invisible, right? And to me, that's a powerful image of like
Mhm.
what families are trying to navigate through, right? There's all these pieces they're trying to fit together, and this puzzle has pieces that are missing, completely invisible to them, right? And that's,
And we don't know where they are.
you don't know where they are, right? Yeah. I think, that I think is me you're talking about was so powerful about Marcia going and speaking, right? You're like, all of a sudden this puzzle piece became visible for you guys. And all the families were like, this was a missing piece. We didn't even know it existed, but it was a missing
Mhm.
piece. And now we can start to maybe fit together the puzzle pieces of resources that could support our children, right? So I think it's a beautiful metaphor of how parents have to learn to be an advocate for their children, right? In this
Yes.
CHD world. So yeah, lots of great things in there, lots of powerful story, amazing advocacy. Make sure you go check it out because there's some great comments in there.
And I do want to just say, and this is almost to Marsha too. I know we've had this conversation, but Kristen, you hearing about Marsha or like hearing Marsha speak at transplant camp, you and another parent both immediately sent me a message just saying like, do you know about this? Have you met Marsha? And I have never had a presentation like that. And so until I sought out conferences where I was learning about this wasn't something that was coming across my radar. So it's a bit of a shout out to the transplant camp for having those education pieces. It's also thinking about where else we can do that because transplant camp is transplant is a pretty severe condition. And my kiddo is much like he's more mild case of congenital heart disease, but we see all of those executive functioning issues as well. And so this isn't just a most complex case, which sometimes we kind of focus that way. So I want to say thank you again for introducing me to Marsha. Marsha, I know you've got kids all around you. I can see dinosaurs. Is there anything that you wanted to chime in on either of the stories? And you can just shake your head and yell at me if you want to.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much to both of you guys for providing this public forum for these stories because I feel like I want to scream from the rooftops about this stuff. And it's been a privilege to be a part of this work. So I think, Kristen, it was you and another family from that transplant camp that those words stuck with me in a way that I don't think they I expected, is that you went through heart transplant and the hardest part of your path has been educational and neurodevelopmental. And I'm like, how is that a thing? How is that possible? That there's just not enough support and resources and all of the siloed stuff. So I'm really glad that this is coming to light and more people are spreading some of these stories, which is wonderful to see. I'm a little worried. So please send these to everyone because all of those neurodevelopmental programs in Calgary for heart disease kids they're struggling.
I think that's actually why we struggle a little bit more and not advocated as hard is because he has a full heart. So even though he's CHD, I think he got lost in the complex care here because he has a full heart, which obviously, data proves that they're just the same. And it doesn't matter if it's a full heart or half a heart or, they're just a valve missing. The complexities are there and they're known. So that's my next resource is to change that, but that's a government issue.
Yeah. Can I jump in? I got to read one comment from Kim.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful comment. She said, all of this speaks volumes to me. I turn 50 next year, and I think I would have gained so much if I would have had this knowledge and help. If I had it through my path of healing. My mom knew the physical diagnosis prenatal, but knowing or having help for the psychological side would have helped me so much. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Kim, for sharing that. I think you're talking, about what Kristen is trying to change, right? And then what all the people involved in this is trying to change. So thank you for validating that. Yeah.
And I feel a lot of people don't understand the actual side effects of it, right? They just think that's how their kid is until you start talking about it. And I know for sure one other family I've connected with, they've been able to put the pieces together because of my connections and now have official diagnosis for help. So that's where I'm a big advocate in even sharing that too. So,
and I think that sometimes you don't even hear when those stories happen, when somebody learns something from your story or from an Instagram or a Facebook post that you've made about something that's come up for you, and you don't always hear back about how those have affected people. But it's one of the reasons that I talk. It's how I've met people that are doing these stories with me, because if you're not talking about it, nobody's hearing about it, right? And we have to get loud to get those supports for our kiddos and for their siblings and our partners. It's all of us that are involved in this part of it, of the work. Kristen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and being so vulnerable and open. I really appreciate that. Marsha, thanks for hopping on, even though I didn't give you any warning that you would be doing. It's so neat to be able to see like the different project partners get to participate in this kind of conversation together. The next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to ask Alina and Carissa to come on, and I will highlight the organizations that they're coming from. But I just want to introduce you to two organizations that have I've really noticed making advances in their support for patients and families in the world of congenital heart disease and also childhood onset heart disease. So we're very specifically, and I've talked about congenital heart disease here, and I just want to clarify the two terms because congenital heart disease is when you're born with something that's happened to your heart. Childhood onset could be anything that happens while in childhood. So it's not necessarily born with it, but that's another group of kids who would seek pediatric supports. And so the two organizations that we have here today is Western Canadian Children's Heart Network. We have Alina Williams. She's the program manager, and she's going to share a little bit about their programs. And then also we have from Conquering CHD, their executive director, Carissa Ostrom. So ladies, Mike's going to spotlight you as well. I'm going to share the website just so that people can kind of have that to look at while you're talking. But Alina, will you hop on first and just tell us a bit about Western Canadian Children's Heart Network?
Absolutely. Kristy, I just have to thank you for the work that you're doing here tonight and for inviting me to talk. My name is Lena Williams. I'm program manager for WCCHN. And I just wanted to put it out there that I myself have two children who both struggle with neurodevelopmental issues as well. So this is landing on me from two different angles at the same time. But I wanted to give a special thank you specifically to Kristy and Kristen for sharing your stories. They're just such a powerful reminder that congenital heart journeys are not just medical, but they're deeply human. WCCHN was founded 25 years ago to answer an urgent need, and children and families living with congenital heart disease deserve the same quality of care no matter where they live. And it's that founding vision that still guides us today. To this day, we connect families, clinicians, and researchers so that nobody has to walk the congenital heart disease journey alone. We bring people together across distances because we believe that geography shouldn't mute somebody's story. A large part of what we do does concentrate on data. But when I was a nursing student many, many moons ago, I remember one instructor said to me, you always have to, you might be monitoring a lot of tubes and a lot of lines, but if you trace each one back at the end, you will always find a person. And WCCHN very much adopts that perspective in terms of data. We recognize that behind every number is somebody's life, somebody's struggle, and somebody's hope. One of the things that we've really been concentrating on in the last couple of years here at WCCHN is this idea of co-creating. It's not just that you tell your stories to us, but you're helping to shape the path with us. Because we recognize that the future of heart health isn't made by experts alone. It's stitched together by lived experience and by the people in this very room today and by every heart family who keeps telling their story. And so in honor of World Heart Day, we acknowledge Kristy and Kristen, and we're going to hear from Jen as well. We acknowledge your courage and your narrative and your presence in this community. Together, we'll keep building a world where every heart has a voice, every journey has support, and every life is valued. And as Kristen's digital story shows, there's still a lot left to be done. So I just want to give a big thanks to all involved tonight. I'm going to drop our own website. I mean, I know you did already, Kristy, but I'm going to link specifically to the newer developmental neurodevelopment page that focuses on Vina and Marsha's work that they have done recently. It's just so leading and cutting edge here in Western Canada. So I would encourage every person on this call to have a look at that page and tell us what we missed so that we can improve it and do better. I'm sitting here looking at the page myself tonight. I'm thinking, oh my God, we don't mention executive function. And Jen had a comment in the chat box, and I'm like, there's no mention of an IEP on the actual page. And so already I've walked away learning from your stories and things that we can do better to help get that message out there earlier.
Thank you so much, Alina. And I do want to mention Western Canadian Children's Heart Network, their website is really well set up for patients and families to find information in Canada because anybody here who's had any illness has probably Googled what they should be looking for, and it's a terrible idea. And so having resources that are vetted, that can be found easily, trusted. Thank you for words. I appreciate that. I think they have really done an incredible job, and the website and the work that they've done has been in consultation with parents, which I think is a really key piece to that as well. Alina, thanks for jumping on and telling us all about it. Feel free to throw anything in the chat. I will absolutely put that in the email as well. Carissa, Conquering CHD. Now, this is a US-based organization. Will you tell us about Conquering CHD?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us to join you guys. This has been amazing. I personally am a heart mom. I have a 9-year-old who has a congenital heart defect, and Conquering CHD really strives on helping parents navigate the journey from birth to adulthood. We even had resources for bereaved families as well, and really helping guide parents to ask the right questions of their providers. I know for me personally, when my son was born, we were unaware of his diagnosis, and I went to Google and was Googling, what do I talk to my cardiologist about? And I actually came across Conquering CHD's resources at the time. So this organization really strives to help educate patients and families on how to do that. We also do a lot of advocacy work on the state and federal level to make sure that CHD is receiving funding so that it can be studied more and tracked so that children who grow up into adults are not lost to care, that they continue their care through adulthood. And we also love to do webinars around neurodevelopment. That has been a huge topic within the CHD community over the last few years. So bringing in organizations like CNOC to talk about neurodevelopment and how that affects our CHD kiddos has been super important.
Carissa, thanks so much. I am putting Conquering CHD's website in there. For those people that know me, I love highlighting what nonprofits are doing because there's a lot of passion that goes into that work, and it's usually informed in a different way than sometimes all the bureaucracy of, I shouldn't be saying this out loud on recorded sessions, but thank you, Carissa. Thank you, Alina, for talking about this. Neurodevelopment has become a huge issue, and we're talking about it at places like CNOC. For all those people that are like, what are you talking about? What is a CNOC thing? Cardiac Neurodevelopmental's Outcome Collaborative. The idea there is like really focusing in on neurodevelopment around cardiac issues, and they've done a lot of work in this space. Carissa and I work on a couple different committees where we are parent voices bringing some of this information. So even when the stories aren't ours, when I'm learning from Kristen and Kristi and Jen about their own experiences and comparing it to my own, it gives me more information to be able to bring and share. And what I heard in their meeting that they just had in Denver was a lot around education and how to support kids in education. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about. So looking forward to more conversations about that. But again, thanks, Carissa, for coming on. All right. We are going to get to our third storyteller here, Jen Saran. Jen, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to bring you on up here. Now, I have known Jen for a while. She and I have been on a number of different projects. She's been on the Co-Created podcast twice. The second one just came out last week. So if you're like, oh, this is piquing my interest, please go listen. I had spoken at a conference, a webinar that Jen was involved in, and she sent me a message and just said, hey, can we talk? I have this book, which you can see behind her. I've got my copy right here. And we ended up doing some digital storytelling projects together, where first we just did her digital story. We tried to pitch for funding to see if we could get funded to do the story, and we ended up not getting that funding, but it led to a lot of other things. And Jen is now a facilitator with Common Language as well. She created her story with me. She's created multiple more stories. She's had a big project that she just brought down to the CNOC conference in Denver just this past week. And so she's got lots to share. Jen, Is there anything you'd like to say before we just play your story?
So my story will hit a little bit different than the other two. It's less about the neurological impact of my child and more about the neurological impact of me as a caregiver and one of the worst moments of our life in his journey. So that's all I'll say.
Mhm.
All right, Mike, take it away. Friends, as you're listening, you're thinking again, what's resonating for you? What can you learn from this story?
All right, here we go. Jen's story.
Overwhelm. To drown beneath a huge mass. To feel submerged or engulfed. Feeling overpowered. To feel overcome. This journey is horribly difficult. I was sitting at my child's bedside. It was somewhere around day 15 in the PICU, and things weren't looking good. Time had lost all meaning. As I sat there, I felt a physical weight descend on me. It had been pushing against me since day one, but I had fought hard to keep it at bay and leave room for hope to grow and ignite life into our child's medical situation. I had celebrated every positive turn and every minuscule positive change with all the gusto of humanity when we first set foot on the moon. I endured cynical looks, comments, and diagnoses from medical staff and countered them all with optimism. They may have thought me delusional, unable to come to grips with reality, but I wasn't. I was clear-headed. I was stubborn in my resolve to fight for my child. I was using every tool I had to be my child's best cheerleader. But then it happened. As I sat on that rolling chair, although not moving, I felt a swarm of fear rise within me. One fear after another darted, each stinging my heart and mind. Each dark possibility weakened my determination for optimism. I couldn't think. I could hardly breathe. I can't believe I didn't slide right off the chair. My parents were about to arrive and were texting for directions to the PICU, and I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. I was simply paralyzed. Emotion flooded and overwhelmed my senses, and I was stuck with the tightness locked and pounding in my chest, a tightness that returns every time my mind goes back to that moment, even now. Overwhelm is going to happen. Sometimes it's a daily state. Sometimes it's a dam that breaks, leaving you helpless. You usually are not alone, though. Others are there to help you breathe and move. Talk to them. Need ideas? If you're gone for a long time and need someone to mow your grass, ask the person begging to help to do it for you. Does your house need a clean before you return home? Do you need someone to grab groceries for you? Do you need someone to watch your mail for bills? Do you need a friend to take your kids for a few days? Do you need to speak to a counselor, a pastor, a friend?
Ah, Jen. Man. Powerful.
Zoom's gotten so fancy. There's all these hearts everywhere. I know. It's amazing. Case of hearts. It's amazing. Jen, it is so nice to watch another one of your stories. You have an incredible voice for voiceover, first of all, and your way of choosing images and there was very few, if any, personal images in there. And so that idea of being able to tell a story without necessarily showing all of those pieces of your family, you do that in an incredible way that I think opens storytelling up to the idea that it doesn't have to include all, we still get the feeling of you and the personal narrative coming through on that. So thank you. Okay, what was it like watching with everybody here today? As she's going to answer that, we're going to get people to put in the chat what resonated for you, what's standing out, are there questions you have? Jen, what
Yeah.
stood out for you?
It hits me every time. I think one of the interesting pieces of this journey that hits different than I think some other chronic illnesses and diseases that children face and caregivers have to navigate is that we have moments of intensity and then moments of calm and moments of intensity and moments of calm. And sometimes the intensity lasts longer, sometimes it's short. The distance between the two always changes, but we always carry that memory of the intensity, even in the calm. And it's a weird sort of thing to kind of balance and handle. And so watching the story gets me all emotional again because it brings me back to those moments where it was like chaotic. That was the moment that my son was on life support and we didn't think he'd make it, and he did. So it ended well. And it doesn't always end well. And you carry that in those moments as well and in the story. And these stories, and they probably it looks slightly different than the other two because it wasn't created simply as me telling my story. This whole project with that I did and got funded eventually with the WCCHN, put my book into a digital story audiobook and produced 3 digital stories. So this is the third one in that package. And those are all linked on the WCCHN website as well that Alina was showing earlier. And these were created for parents. This was intended for parents who are in the thick of it and they don't know who to go to. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to feel or even think or process all the emotion that's going on. And my hope was that in the process of making these stories, and in the way the chapters are written, they're all super short, is that parents can just take a sip of water, kind of thinking of like a marathon runner. You have to take sips of water as you're running. Otherwise, you do not cross the finish line. And when we are in the thick of it with our kids, we need life too. We need to continue to feed our own emotional stability in order to be the anchors for our kids and helping them navigate. Because if I'm totally losing it, I am not helping my kid to be able to neurologically process what's going on for them as well. And that's really, really hard to do sometimes. So this story was created with the purpose that it gives a parent the ability to go sit in the bathroom and cry it out if they need to, because that also needs to happen.
Yeah.
I really related to the talk of overwhelm and the permission to feel. And like tying in the suggestions right at the end about just like it actually brings you out of the story a bit and just like,
Mhm.
oh, there are small things that I can do. And I think that was a really interesting way to do the digital story as well. Mike, what was either resonating for you or things you've been hearing in the chat?
Yeah. I'll get to the chat in a second. There's some great comments in there. But man, what I found so compelling in your story, Jen, is that tension um between cheering hard for your kid, but not too hard. You know what I mean? Like here you are cheering all these small wins, right? But then people are also trying to give you these, realistic sort of expectations, right? And
Yeah.
man, to me that sounds like such a difficult line to walk as a parent of a child with a serious medical condition, right? On one hand, cheering and supporting and encouraging, and on the other hand, recognizing the challenge that exists and the possibilities and the potential for heartbreak, right? And man, I think you did a really great job of describing that paradox, I guess you could say, of
Mhm.
being a family caregiver for a child with serious illness. So man, I really that's what really stood out to me. Here you are cheering, and then everyone's trying to help you, and then you have this moment where it all just crashes down, right? And you just need to allow yourself to feel fully
Yeah.
the difficulty of that moment. Man, it's powerful. A lot of people in here talked about the water, right? The swirling around the rocks, the powerful, the currents, the overwhelm in the journey. People really like that metaphor, I think, to describe the way that you're pushed and pulled as a family caregiver, as a parent, in these moments. A lot of people saying powerful, and very real, and be sharing honestly about these things, right? About where you were at seems to really have connected with people. So yeah. Rebecca said, I love this story more every time I see it. So you have a fan out there. Maybe you can give autographs later. Who knows?
Well, and it brings me back when I was looking at the table of contents of your book while we were talking, and when I had first read that book, I literally had every second chapter as like this would make an amazing digital story. It was when I was first learning about it, and when Jen and I started talking about it, it was just that like snippet piece, like each one is about a different part of that experience. And it was just, I'm so glad that you got the funding and were able to put these stories together so that people can do it. And I also wanted to draw attention to the fact that I didn't co-facilitate that story with Jen. She does this work all on her own, and she now works with other people to create digital stories. So that idea that there's many of us that do this kind of work with the Common Language Collective, and so we're not always the perfect fit for a project. And so finding a person that is a good fit for your project there's just a lot of different options out there. And we try to highlight the different facilitators and the areas that they specialize in on the co-created podcast. So definitely go and have a listen there as well. Jen, what are you thinking about? I don't usually need to prompt Jen with questions. She just tells me things that she wants to talk about. We have enough experience with this. But now I do have a question. So never mind. I want to ask you. You went to the CNOC annual meeting. You created a poster. You went down there to Denver and you brought your project, Caregivers Corner, down there. Tell us what that was like, being a parent going to a medical conference.
It was crazy. It was great. I loved going. I think like 14 years ago when this all started, this wasn't like, okay, so my kid's going to go through stuff. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do this project. I'm going to go to conferences and talk about it. There was none of that. I didn't even start writing anything for anybody else except my own like emotional sanity in the beginning. I blogged every day from like the day of diagnosis because I needed to process my thoughts. And so it just kind of like slowly moved into something bigger. And I don't know of like how other heart parents have felt like about this too, but it's always a weird tension. I mentioned this at the conference to a few people as well. It's a weird tension as a caregiver to be like, I want to share what we've learned to help people, but it's also my child's journey and I'm not wanting to like build something around my kid's diagnosis. Like I feel that tension within me. It's not my story, but yet it's also intricately part of my story as my child and as a primary caregiver in his story at this point in his life. And those are weird pieces to kind of balance. So I feel, how do I go into the conference from here? Because there's different ways to go about this. One of the things that I think I took away from the conference was that we did a lot of things right accidentally. And maybe not accidentally, maybe because we just had the perfect person, the perfect nurse, the perfect intensivist, the perfect cardiologist that told us the right things in the right time that helped us build a strong level of care for our kid from the get-go. But in the process of all of that, it taught me to be an advocate from the very beginning. So in that way, it didn't feel weird being at CNOC because we've been having conversations since the beginning because we were invited in on day 10 and we're told your voice is important on rounds. What does mom feel like is going on today for her kid? And I'm like, I have a voice. You want to hear from me? I hardly know my kid. He's 10 days old. Like I'm still getting to know like what he looks like right now. I don't know how to like answer your question, but it began to teach me to say stuff. So then now being at CNOC, this is a conference that had hundreds of people. You have pediatricians, you have neurologists, you have cardiologists, you have surgeons, you have occupational therapists, you have nurses, you have people who are doing research projects, you have parents, you have patients, you have caregivers. Like it's the whole gamut and we all look the same. Like we're all wandering around as one group. And there was something really unique about just having all of our costuming stripped off and we were just people sitting around conversations. I laughed earlier, Kristy, when you had said what CNOC stood for, because I leaned over to one of the parents I was sitting with during one of the sessions and I was like, I don't know what this one like phrase that they keep using is. It's like an abbreviation for something, but I don't know what it is. They have to at least tell us once because we're not in the medical world. We have no idea what's going on. It was like watching 50 TED Talks on YouTube at 1.5 speed for like 2 hours. Every time, like everyone talked so fast and they were rushing through all the information, and like some really smart people are doing some really amazing things in the neurological community to benefit cardiac kids. And so my takeaway, even when I didn't understand the depths of it or what their chart meant or why the chart didn't look like what they were saying, because I don't know how to read scientific charts, it was that they care. They're looking into things that I didn't even know that they were looking into. And that gave me confidence and hope as a parent. So that would be my first big takeaway being at a conference like that. And the second time, or the second piece of it is throughout the conference over and over again. How do we support our kids neurologically? It always came back to we need to support parents and we need to support kids. And how do we do that? How do we do that? So it was exciting to be there with my poster with Caregivers Corner to say, here's one resource, here's a option, because there's going to be every resource that's going to connect with different parents. So here's a resource that can kind of help with that. And I think it's like the easiest way to do it. I told someone, you want a shortcut, just see the parent, see the kid, address them, talk to them, get to know the siblings' names who are visiting the kid's bedside. Ask them how they are. Like just small little interactions draws them into the team and makes them know that they can actually have a conversation. Like beginning just basic conversation can go a long way to helping parents out.
Well, a number of different times I've heard you say it's little things that set us up for success. It's showing that you care. It doesn't have to be all of these big, grand gestures, but all of those little pieces to the healthcare providers that are on this call and are thinking about how do we um, use what we've learned tonight. It's those little things. Introducing somebody to the programs that are close by to their family, checking in with them, seeing them as people. Like those are small little moments that make a big difference.
Yeah. My son on his second surgery, he got admitted into the ICU as like before surgery just to get on a med trip. So it was like a weird intro. And the nurses was doing checks and his little sister. So he had a 3-year-old and a 6.5-year-old sister with him. He was 5 at the time. And they listened to their hearts while they listened to his heart. All my kids had the stethoscope put on their hearts. And that was just made it so comfortable for all the kids. It took her an extra like 30 seconds on her vital checks on my son, but it just made it feel normal for all my kids. Like that was one of those really great start points.
And I think that is also the pieces around like going to a conference like that was physicians, but it was also SLPs and OTs and child life and education liaisons and patient navigators and all of these different perspectives coming together to think about how do we do things better is really, really interesting. In the chat, I'm throwing in Jen's recent podcast episode. And the reason I really want to make sure that's in there is it links you to her Caregivers Corner work. So if that sparked an interest for you, all of that is linked into the podcast and she talks about it more extensively there. And definitely reach out to her if that's something that is of interest for you. Friends, we're getting close to the end here. Jen, is there anything else you want to say before we kind of bring everybody back together?
No, always, but I'm good. I've said enough.
That is perfect. Well, to each of our storytellers tonight, Kristi Bateman, Kristen Miller, Jen Saran, maybe we could bring them all up, Mike. Can we pull off that kind of magic as we're talking here? I just want to say that my heart is so full of gratitude to each of you. Oh, I'm getting emotional. Uh-oh, watch out. For doing this work with me, for being interested in telling your stories, and for sharing them publicly, because this is definitely the type of project that could have been done just for yourself and to have the experience in creating that story and working through it for yourself, but you are choosing to make it public for other people to learn from too, and that's huge. So I'm so grateful for each of you. Happy World Heart Day. Mike, I know you want to do a bit of a checkout with everybody.
Yeah. I just one more comment.
Yeah.
We gotta say, and I think this, it's based on something you guys were talking about, right? And Jen, you talked about how showing that you care, right? And sometimes it's hard to know, like, how do we show that we care for our children, for our spouses, for healthcare providers, for their patients, it's hard to know how to show that you care, right? Because I think that seems to be something that's sort of a core underlying theme that comes through everything that we've talked about tonight, right? Is people showing they care in different ways, whether that's by bringing in information that we didn't know was a missing puzzle piece, right? Or by, spending time explaining something to a patient or a family member who doesn't understand the technical language, right? And I want to share one quick thing, because this is something I heard from an elder that I worked with for an Indigenous Health Project. And I was very nervous, right, for this project. I was going to be going into people's houses in their communities, working cross culturally, not knowing, if I was going to say or do the wrong thing. And his name was Harley Croshoe. And he said, Mike, you know what? If you show people your heart, when you screw up, you can move forward together. And I love that idea that it's not like that everything's going to work out perfectly, right? You will screw up, and families, they will say the wrong things to their kids. Healthcare providers may do the wrong actions, but if you know each other's heart, then you can move forward together. And what I love about, all the digital stories tonight is all the parents here showed their heart, right? And I think it's an encouragement for healthcare providers to show their hearts, right? And why are they here? Why does this child matter to them? And I mean, man, what a great way to do that through a story. And I know that there is a healthcare provider story shared in the chat here. So make sure you take a look at that. You watch that, because I think it goes both directions, right? And when we show each other our hearts, then we can move forward together, no matter the challenges that we're facing. So anyways, Jen, that really, your conversation with Kristi brought that up in me. I think it's a really cool way to wrap up the idea of sharing stories and why sharing stories matter so much. So yeah, that's all I have to say, Kristi. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful night, wonderful stories. Thank you all for all the wonderful comments. I've really enjoyed the chat and interacting with you all on there.
And so we are going to just check in with everybody here. Mike likes to do this when we do our trainings. I like to do it when I do my screenings, and I often will show like the heart coping chart that we got when Ken was having his surgery, and talk about how are you feeling right now. I think like anytime we can think about how to approach this with our kids, and talk about those feelings, and that permission to feel is really important. But Mike, when we're checking.
Yeah, let's do one word. And sometimes we like to end all of our sessions like this. Just share one word, how you're feeling right now. The first thing that pops to mind, put it in the chat, and it'd be great to see what your one word is. Thankful. Awesome. Inspired. Gratitude. Community. Awesome.
Energized, proud.
Gratitude. Inspired. Appreciative. Roller coaster. Yes, Jin, that's a great one. Yeah, I think tonight. So roller coaster of emotions. Reflective. Courage. I love it. Grateful. Strong. I love it. Yeah. Amazed. Cool. Yeah. These are all great words, and no matter where you're at right now, whether you feel like you're at the dip in the roller coaster or you're feeling energized and grateful and inspired, just know, this is all normal things to experience, right? These are normal emotions to experience when you engage with real stories, right? Real stories come with real emotions. And the fact that people are feeling things tonight is probably a good sign that that you are all connected in some way, and you haven't shut down that emotional side of your life. And so love it. Energized. There's some great ones in here that are still showing up. So thank you all for being here. Drained. Yes, drained. I mean, that's one for sure too. So that's actually a great one to end on. If you are feeling drained, right? Just make sure, first of all, know that's, like I said, a normal thing to experience after engaging in a very emotional evening, but make sure you do a little bit of self-care tonight, whatever that is for you. I'll probably go wrestle my boys and get out some energy that way. Some people may want to go for a walk, a glass of wine, a TV show, some music, whatever that is for you. Please make sure you spend a little time doing some self-care tonight. So, Kristi, I'll leave it to you to sign us off here. But yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's been such a great time together.
Well, and I think we need to do one more round for
Yes,
our
there we
sisters.
go.
Howard's incredible job tonight, ladies. And now, friends that are as our audience, I want you just to think about what this would feel like in person. If you could have these conversations with everybody sitting around a table or a kitchen table or a conference room, what this would look like for the conversations and what could be learned coming out of that. Now you get to hear the full closing of the podcast because we're making this an episode. So after we do the co-created podcast exit, you are welcome to wave and sign off. We will stop recording, and then I think the storytellers might stay around if you want to congratulate anybody. Co-Created is brought to you by Common Language Digital Storytelling, facilitator training for health and wellness changemakers. True to the name, this podcast is a team effort. Huge thanks to our storytellers tonight, our live virtual audience, and each of the partners that's working to make person-centered care a non-negotiable. If this conversation resonated with you, tell a friend or a colleague about Co-Created or send them one of the digital stories we mentioned tonight. Thanks, friends, for joining us for World Heart Day.